story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, let's take a look at the latest headlines. Israeli tanks and planes bomb Western Rafah, killing at least 9 and injuring more than 30 Palestinians. Israel deploys more infantry into Rafah after uncovering several underground tunnels used by Hamas. The Dutch Air Force commander confirms that F-16 fighter jets will in fact be delivered to Kyiv this summer. The Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, and Norway have all pledged to provide Ukraine 80 U.S.-made F-16 fighter jets. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets the U.S. congressional delegation led by Congressman Michael McFaul and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in New Delhi. This after the U.S. lawmakers met Tibetan spiritual leader the Dalai Lama just yesterday. The death toll from this year's Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia exceeds 1,000 as temperatures cross 123 degrees Fahrenheit. At least 2 million people visited Islam's holiest site in Mecca just this year. And a collision between a passenger and cargo train leaves at least 2 people dead and several wounded in the South American nation of Chile. Officials say the force of the collision left the trains heavily damaged, complicating rescue operations. We begin in the Middle East. Lebanon-based Hezbollah has threatened to invade northern Israel should a full-scale war break out between the two foes. And Hezbollah's leaders say new weapons would be used against Israeli forces.
Israel has to wait for us on the ground, in the air, and in the sea. We have said this before, and I will say again today. If the war is imposed on Lebanon, the resistance will fight without control, without rules, and without a ceiling. Of course, we fought with part of our weapons, and we now have new weapons, but I won't say what they are. When the decision is made, they will be seen on the front lines.
Now, these remarks come amid soaring tensions at the Lebanon-Israel border. And meanwhile, Israeli officials say they're ready to launch an all-out war inside Lebanon to eliminate the Iran-backed group.
We are completing the land and air readiness, strengthening the intelligence systems, and preparing for any possibility. We have to remember the basic situation, that Hezbollah started a war against us, even if limited, on the October 8th, a day after Hamas, and since then it has not stopped it, and in that sense, we have an obligation to change the situation in the north and return the citizens safely to their homes, and we will find the way to do this action. Because when I look at the citizens and I meet them, both their representatives and the people, they have an expectation, and I think it is justified, and we will have to implement it.
Now, Israel's foreign minister also called out Hezbollah for releasing surveillance drone footage showing the port of Haifa, which is operated by foreign companies from China and India. The Hezbollah chief also suggested he may send ground forces into Israeli territory and issued a warning to Cyprus, which he claimed was allowing Israel to conduct military exercises within its territory.
In one word, and in this international platform, Cyprus should be warned that opening Cypriot bases and airports to the Israelis to target Lebanon means that the Cypriot government has become part of the war. And the resistance will deal with Cyprus as if it is part of the war.
Now, the Cypriot president refutes these claims, saying his island nation was in no way involved in military operations in the region. He also added that Cyprus wants to be a part of the solution and not the problem. Now, amid heightened tensions, the United States is striving to calm the situation in the region. In fact, on Tuesday, an American diplomat said President Joe Biden is trying to avert a greater war along the border between Israel and Lebanon.
The conversations that I had here today in Beirut and the ones that I had yesterday in Israel, both are being conducted because the situation is serious. We have seen an escalation over the last few weeks, and what President Biden wants to do is to avoid a further escalation to a greater war. That is the effort here. It will take everyone's interest in ending this conflict now, and we believe that there is a pathway diplomatically to do it, if the sides agree to it. But this is a very serious situation that we are in.
Now, Hezbollah recently said that it has carried out more than 2,000 military operations against Israel since Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu launched his offensive in Gaza in October of last year. Hezbollah is a key ally of Hamas and says it will continue to target Israel until the war in Gaza is stopped. However, with no plans to end the war in Gaza, it seems Israel is staring at another war along its northern border. Vladimir Putin has arrived in Vietnam for a two-day state visit. The Russian leader was welcomed in Vietnam's capital, Hanoi, with a 21-gun salute during a military ceremony. The Vietnamese president congratulated Putin on his re-election and even praised Russia's achievements, including domestic political stability. Now, Putin's visit to the Asian country has drawn major criticism from the United States and from Vietnam's other top trading partners, all of whom had earlier warned the risk of normalizing relations with Russia, calling them a blatant violation of international law. The spokesperson for the U.S. Embassy in Hanoi also criticized the trip, saying, quote, "No country should give Putin a platform to promote his war of aggression and otherwise allow him to normalize his atrocities," end quote. Now, much like Putin's visit to North Korea, the trip to Vietnam could signal deepening relations between the two nations as Putin looks to garner concrete support amid international sanctions over his grinding war in Ukraine.
Russia attaches great importance to the issues of further strengthening the traditionally friendly Russian-Vietnamese comprehensive strategic relations, strategic partnership relations. And these relations continue to develop progressively in the spirit of equality, mutual respect, and consideration of each other's interests. Our two nations agreed to research and expand cooperation in the fields of alternative sources of energy and clean energy, contributing to green transformation and sustainable development. The two sides will also strengthen defense and security cooperation in response to non-traditional security challenges based on the basis of international law, aimed to contribute to peace and security in the region and the world.
Now, analysts, on the other hand, question if the visit will in fact bring any tangible benefit to Vietnam and say it's instead a reflection of the historical ties shared by the two nations. Moscow, in fact, a long-standing friend of Hanoi, where many still remember the support given by the Soviet Union to Vietnam in the wars against France and the United States. The former Soviet Union was one of the first countries to establish diplomatic relations with the Vietnamese government of Ho Chi Minh. Though Russia is not a major source of trade for Vietnam, U.S. sanctions against Putin mean that the likelihood of a major economic announcement remain very low. Trade between the two countries stood at just $3.5 billion in 2022, which is far less than Vietnam's $175 billion in trade with China and the $123 billion with the United States. The Southeast Asian country marks the third nation that President Putin has visited after China and North Korea since he was sworn in for a fifth term in May. And speaking of Putin and the war that he's unleashed on Europe, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has announced that more NATO members are in fact fulfilling their target of 2% GDP spending on defense. Now, speaking to the American media, Stoltenberg said that 23 of the 32 NATO members were expected to meet the group's defense spending commitments for the year.
When we made the pledge to invest 2% of GDP in defense back at the Wales summit of NATO in 2014, only 3 allies met that mark. And that was the United States, Greece, and the United Kingdom. But later today, when I see President Biden, I will announce new defense spending figures for all allies. And I can already now reveal that this year, more than 20 allies will spend at least 2% of GDP on defense. This is good for Europe and good for America, especially since much of this extra money is spent here in the United States.
Now, in a surprise compliment, Secretary Stoltenberg praised former President Donald Trump for pushing NATO allies to spend more on defense. The NATO Secretary General said, quote, "I worked with Trump over those 4 years, and the reality is that he had a very clear message on the need for European allies to spend more, and I agree with him." Now, the NATO defense investment target was agreed upon back in 2014 when member states pledged to spend 2% of their GDP on national and joint defense. However, European allies failed to reach the target, with only 10 NATO members fulfilling the criteria until just last year. Now, Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine appears to have had an effect across the alliance, as almost all nations in NATO, except Italy and Slovenia, have increased their defense spending. The increase in spending by NATO members also comes from the fear of Donald Trump being re-elected as president this November. The former president has repeatedly said that he would not protect NATO allies if they didn't meet the defense investment target. Now, if true, that would be a direct violation of NATO's charter's collective defense in Article 5, which states that NATO allies have to treat an attack on one as an attack on all. Now, unlike the defense investment target, the NATO charter is legally binding, and a violation by Donald Trump would have severe repercussions on ties between the U.S. and European allies. And contrary to Donald Trump, President Joe Biden has reaffirmed more American support to NATO with the ongoing war in Ukraine.
We've made NATO, under your leadership, we made it larger, stronger, and then it's more united than it's ever been. So I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for the incredible work you've done. Together, we're deterred further Russian aggression in Europe. And, John, it's a very important announcement to make today. Record number of allies meeting the NATO commitment to at least 2% of their GDP on defense. And in fact, the number is more than double since we took office.
Now, President Biden will also lead the NATO summit, which will be held right here in Washington starting the 9th of July, as the Security Alliance marks its landmark 75th anniversary. The NATO alliance is looking stronger than ever in deterrence to Putin, who is increasingly threatening Europe and the United States with World War III. And here in the United States, Boeing CEO David Calhoun has apologized to the families of the victims from 2 deadly plane crashes. The 2 crashes involving Boeing's 737 MAX jets took place in 2018 and 2019 and killed nearly 350 people. Calhoun's apology came as he appeared to testify before the Senate's investigation subcommittee. However, relatives of the victims say they want the U.S. government to charge Calhoun with manslaughter. And the families have also demanded compensation of almost $25 billion from Boeing. Here's our report with the latest.
5 years ago, 346 people were killed in 2 plane crashes within a span of 5 months. First off the coast of Indonesia in October 2018, and then in Ethiopia in March 2019. And the one common thing between these 2 accidents was that they involved Boeing 737 MAX airplanes, which were later found to have faulty flight control systems. Now, years later, the American planemaker CEO David Calhoun has apologized to the families who lost their loved ones in those plane crashes.
I would like to apologize on behalf of all of our Boeing associates spread throughout the world, past and present, for your losses. They're gut-wrenching. And I apologize for the grief that we have caused. And I want you to know we are totally committed in their memory to work and focus on safety for as long as we're employed by Boeing. So again, I'm sorry.
Calhoun apologized as he came face to face with the relatives of the victims before his opening remarks in front of a Homeland Security Investigations subcommittee on Tuesday. He faced an intense grilling during the special hearing at the U.S. Senate. Calhoun was questioned on Boeing's production inspection processes and whistleblower safety amid calls for his resignation. Now, this was Calhoun's first appearance before Congress since Boeing's mishap in January when the door of a 737 MAX 9 plane ripped off during an Alaska Airlines flight at an elevation of about 16,000 feet near Portland. The 67-year-old, who received a salary of more than $32 million last year, took over as Boeing CEO after 2 fatal crashes, but plans to step down at the end of this year. On Tuesday, Calhoun testified that the company has learned from its past mistakes and accepted that Boeing had earlier retaliated against whistleblowers, but it had listened to those employees since. Calhoun told the Senate that some of Boeing's problems came from an untrained workforce and blamed the layoffs and worker turnover for manufacturing issues at the company.
Much has been said about Boeing's culture. We've heard those concerns loud and clear. Our culture is far from perfect, but we are taking action and we are making progress. We understand the gravity, and we're committed to moving forward with transparency and accountability.
Now, throughout the hearing, Calhoun defended Boeing's safety record during his tenure. He said that the plane maker has taken steps to strengthen its approach to safety, engineering and quality, and was continuing to do so after the January incident. However, the family members who attended the hearing were unimpressed by Calhoun's statements as they heckled him throughout the hearing while holding up photos of the victims. They have now demanded a fine of nearly $25 billion for the plane crashes which killed their loved ones.
That safety, that number one priority of Boeing, of their CEOs, of their management, of their engineer, doesn't mean anything when 346 people died. We are here today and driving here. It doesn't matter how far, because all I could think is the 6 minutes and 4 seconds of my daughter on that Boeing 37 MAX.
I'm here very simply to confront her killer. He was aware of all the design defects. He was one of the head decision makers to put the plane in the air, to keep the plane in the air after Lion Air crashed in late October, 5 months before. And he is a mass killer. And I want to look him in the face. If there's no risk of jail time for these decision makers who play with our lives, then there will be no change.
The families also want the U.S. government to prosecute Calhoun and charge him with manslaughter.
I hope they listen to what Calhoun has to say and also check it with the facts. The Department of Justice told us they had everything that's in the House report. And so I am at odds as to why they were not charged with manslaughter. If they had the information, they could have had a more serious indictment against Boeing. What they did is they actually benefited Boeing.
Now, as Boeing continues to be under numerous probes, the U.S. Justice Department is considering whether to revive a criminal charge of fraud against the plane maker laid in 2021 that was linked to the 2 crashes. The charge has laid dormant since Boeing acknowledged in a settlement that it had misled air safety regulators about aspects of the 737 MAX plane. Boeing had also promised to create a new compliance system to detect and prevent further fraud. But the real question is, will a fraud charge be enough for the families who have lost their loved ones forever?
And finally, is work taking a toll on your mental health? Because Australia may in fact have an answer for that. The island state of Tasmania is hiring people to babysit adorable wombats, become paranormal investigators, and do some stargazing and even taste wine. Sounds like a dream job? Our final report tells you exactly how to make it a reality.
Are you feeling burnt out and are keen to escape the daily grind? Tasmania hears you and wants to help. The Australian state is now offering odd jobs as part of their tourism campaign to attract visitors during the off-season months. Billed as the antithesis of the daily grind, these experiences invite those who are looking for a break from their busy lives. And one such dreamy opportunity comes from the East Coast Nature World. It's offering a one-day volunteer experience to help maintain the physical and mental well-being of its wombats by leading them on their morning excursion. Highlights of the job include taking the wombats on their daily walk and also keeping them motivated with encouragement and snacks. And for those who are not keen on walking wombats, they can choose from a variety of other jobs available. Night owls can opt to apply as star seekers in the locality of Hollow Tree, where they will learn to navigate the stars and assist experts in celestial observations. Those who are musically inclined may want to apply as cave conductors. The job will entail employees conducting a sound check to test the acoustics at the Guns Plains caves and help a local musician warm up for a performance. And ones who thrive off adventure, how would you fancy spending your night with ghosts? If you're excited about this one, then this job is right for you. A listing for a paranormal investigator at Australia's oldest continually run asylum, the Willow Court, will include learning the history of the asylum and even documenting disturbances, spectral figures, or unexplained phenomena. Saving the best for last, and as winters come, a mulled wine is what you need. One super lucky employee will also get to join the wine whisperers at Clover Hill for tasting their way through the winery's full range. Though these jobs are unpaid, successful applicants will be offered some perks. Employees will get free flight tickets to Tasmania, a car to hire, 2 nights of accommodation, and even $500 Australian dollars, which is nearly $330 US, worth of local produce and memorabilia for their labour. Applications are open until July 8th, and only Australian citizens or permanent residents who are aged at least 18 years old and currently residing in the country can apply for this offer. And as they say, getting something so good is not so easy. Employers will also seek a written justification for why they would like to swap their day job for an odd job in Tasmania. So what are you waiting for? Get your resumes ready because the time has come to throw your hat in the ring.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.
It's over! He's done it again! Unbelievable!
Oh, straight into the roof of the net.
Nice one.